All right, hello there. I'm back for another live stream here, doing some mixing, well, I guess editing here uh, during the middle of the day. I've opened up this session. Now, this session is fresh off of being recorded here. You can see there's lots of patch-ins, double vocals, everything's still very, lots of guitars to sort through. Just the bass DI at the moment, still editing going on across the drums here. I'm going to go through here and kind of get everything set for mixing before I jump into actually trying to mix this track here. So I'm going to solo everything through and make sure everything's sounding good, do any last minute tweaks to the raw recordings before I jump into mixing this session. The first thing I want to look at is starting right at the top of the track here. I'm going to look at the kick drum here, and we're going to see how this sounds. That's not a bad raw sounding kick drum. It's a little mid-rangey. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put EQ on this as if I was recording this session. So as if these tracks are running into my board here and I'm recording this session. So I'm going to do API EQ here, and we'll do the DBX 160. So if I was recording this session, this is what would be on the kick drum, and I would sculpt it to make sure it's sitting nicely here inside the track. So let's jump forward here a little bit. So I'm gonna get rid of all this 800 garbage. Much better. I'm not going to go too crazy with the EQ here. One of the bigger hits, I kind of want to be towards 6 dB reduction. Add some makeup gain here. So here's our before and after on the raw kick drum. Cool, that's a great start there. Next thing I'm going to look at here is the snare drum. Let's see how. I think before I even touch this, I'm going to add a sample to that. So let me bounce out the kick drum here. I'm going to create layers for all these drums here before I get into editing all of them, just so I have the originals in case I ever need to get back to them. So I'll create a layer, save it, turn off layers, follow events. So all the bouncing I do here on these tracks doesn't bounce to the layers as well. So I'm going to render this EQ and compression to the kick track here, and we're going to keep moving. Cool, so now we have a kick drum that is done and ready for mixing. So as we do these things, we'll pull the levels down and we'll keep moving. So the snare drum, that's a pretty poor recording of a snare drum. And it jumps dramatically in volume there. It makes me think maybe the microphone's broken. Because then it goes back to being really quiet. So I'm going to try and grab one of these bigger hits and turn it into a sample that I can match with the snare drum. I like that one right there. All I want to do is create some reinforcement for the snare drum because it's not a great recording. And I need something a little bit more isolated to be able to get the snare sounding good. So all I've done here is I've copied this section down. I want this hit right here. So I'm going to tab to transient, Alt X. I'm going to cut right at the transient there. We can see this is our hi-hat hit right here. So I'm going to back this up and create just a tiny, tight little sample here. We'll add, zoomed in too much there, just a little fade at the beginning. And then I want to pull the fade in on the end. Maybe to about there. Let's see what that sounds like. Still a little bit too much on the back end. Let's pull it in further. It's better. Fade it off a little more. Let's see. That's pretty good. So I'm going to turn all these guys off up here, and I'm going to bounce this directly in place here. So Command B. Now we have a nice tight little snare sample that we can copy and match to our snare hits throughout the track here to create a snare sample, either to blend in with the original snare or to completely replace it. So let's see here. I'm just going to go right along to each of these snare hits and paste in the sample. So all we're going to do is tab to transient, go down to the track below, paste back up, tab to the next snare, paste down below. And I'm going to turn all these guys back on up here just so we're following along. And any kind of snare fills, I'm going to have to go through and paste those in because I don't want to try and match samples to any snare fills. Oh, skipped a whole bunch of them there. I want the snare fills to be the raw snare fills. So I'm going to get all these big hits first, and then we'll listen through to our snare drum. And you can see it might seem like a tedious process, but once you get going here, it's pretty speedy on the back end of things. As long as you're not stopping to do any fills along the way, you can get through a track pretty fast. That's just a pause. You can hear how weak the snare sounds in some of these spots. Yeah, is this a fill? It's a tom fill. Cool, here's our back half of the song. So we have the back half of the song here to do, and then the outro as well. I'm assuming, oh, missed the tab button there. I'm assuming we'll have more fills later in the song here, if I remember correctly, because the guitar player puts a big solo on the end of this track here. You can see the hi-hat is getting louder, and the snare seems to be getting quieter. So as we're moving through the transients here, we're catching more and more of the hi-hat and like less of the snare. That's a snare fill, I think. Cool. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy this guy down to keep the raw snare fill. And we'll just edit this guy right here. Fade it in, fade it out. And we'll keep moving. Back to this guy up here. So that's all you do to keep the fills natural, especially if I'm going to directly replace the snare with this sample. I want to keep the original fills, and I don't want to try and paste in fills from with a sample. Cool, tom fill right there. I think I'm going to keep the flam. The flam sounds okay. So we'll just copy that guy down. Same thing we did before. Fade in. Fade out. Leave a little bit of the bleed in there. And maybe pull the flam down a touch. A little bit of evening before we actually do any. So you can see how weak the snare hit is there. And here's our outro section. So we'll see if we have more fills to encounter here. That looks like a big roll coming up. Yeah. Cool. So same thing we did before, copy it down. We don't need that guy in the end. Fade in, fade out. Let's get this fade at the beginning. Fade right into that second roll there. Cool. And then we're at this guy here. Looks like we got another roll coming up. So the only things that really slow you down with this process are doing the fills, but we're at the end of the song here, you can see. Copy that guy down. I think this is a ride hit at the beginning. Yeah. Oh, didn't mean to lower it. We'll fade over that hit. We'll fade down off the fill. And I think our snare comes back in there. Yeah. Hear how weak that is? That's not... And then trying to EQ something that's that tiny sounding, I'll be pulling up top end to try and get air and crack off the snare drum, and all I'll be bringing up is cymbal noise. Yeah, no, I'm going to leave. Oh, don't want to cut it. I just want to copy it down. Fade in, fade out. We don't need tom hits on the end. So now we've got a snare running all the way through. And I think that's exactly what I'm going to do. Is I'm going to nuke the original snare. We'll hide him, and we'll just work with snare 2 at the moment. I'm going to create a layer here for this guy of the original snare edit. And I'm going to bounce this out to one track. All right. So now we can process our snare like I would normally do it while recording. I'm going to add, well, actually the first thing I'm going to do, I think, is put a limiter on here and grab those peaks there at the end on some of the rolls. So if we put this guy at -6, I just want to grab a maybe 3 dB. Yeah. That should be fine. Let's see what that looks like afterwards. See if that gives us an extra level of control on the snare drum. That looks pretty good. It looks like I went too far. So I'm going to roll back a little bit here on the limiter. And maybe go a little under. Maybe go towards 550 a little bit more. Yeah, 3 dB should be fine there. Let me make sure I'm not touching any of the snare drum here. Yeah, that should be perfect. It gives us some dynamic range there as he does bigger rolls, but it also makes sure our snare drum doesn't get crazy loud on a random fill. So it gives us some control on the snare drum there. Now we'll replace that limiter with an EQ and do some normal processing on our snare drum here. So API style EQ is what I'm gonna reach for. A little bit of 100 hertz, maybe some 5K. Yeah, cool. A little bit of this guy. Too much. Again, I just want to try and grab peaks. Cool, looks good. So same thing we did here now. We have our, oh, doing a bunch of random stuff. We have our raw snare drum. I'm gonna bounce it with our processing on, and we'll have our snare that is ready for mixing. All right. Again, it looks like I did too much. So we're going to back this down just a touch more and make sure we're just doing 3 dB reduction on these bigger hits here at the end. That should be fine. Pull it down, bounce it. Looks okay. So now our snare is good and we can move on. Rack toms, I'm just going to edit out these rolls. And I'm going to do it on both of them. So I'm going to group the toms together. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. I want to create a group for these guys. And I'm going to edit these guys together. Just the fills. And you can hear whoever recorded this recorded both rack toms together, which is unfortunate, but we'll have to make do. I don't think there's any bleed on the toms at the beginning. Just in the room. You can hear it's live track though, which is a nice element. Cool. Same thing here. We have our tom fill. Cut before, fade in, fade out. Actually got a floor tom hit there. Nice. So this is an older project, if you can't tell. So a lot of this stuff is trying to save these recordings and get them sounding the best they can before I attempt to mix them. Got another hit here. And older recordings aren't going to be in the best shape sometimes. Especially older digital recordings. Digital wasn't as strong as it is now. So older digital recordings are going to have their issues of people trying to work digital for the first time that are probably used to working analog. Fade that guy in. Got a big cymbal hit. That's the only thing that can be troublesome sometimes, is fading over the cymbals on the toms. As long as you leave enough room and it sounds natural. Got a tom hit there. Again, you can hear our cymbals are pretty gnarly there. Fade over it a little bit. Oh, that's our cymbal hit there. Go a little bit back and try and fade this out a little bit smoother. And let's see how much we actually have on just this guy. Sounds okay. And that is that. All right, we've got our toms locked in here. I'm going to do the same thing I did with our previous guys here. So I'm going to create a layer of the edit in case I ever need to get back to it. You can see I'm very safety oriented. If I ever make mistakes, because we're all human, we all make mistakes, I want to be able to get back to these guys to edit them if I have to. So I'll bounce these guys together. Now the overheads. Let's see how these are sounding. I'm going to rotate them. Because I want it audience perspective, so I want the hi-hat on the right here. If you hear everything's kind of a little bit out of whack, I'm gonna narrow things up a little bit and see if we can get something that's a little tighter. The kick drum's closer to the center than the snare drum is. I might leave those as they are. I am gonna bounce the dual pan on it though, because I don't. The less plugins you have running, I mean, the better. It's not something I need to touch or change. It's just there to flip the spectrum. So that's good. We should have everything okay now for our drums. We'll make sure our Bracasti's there. Yep. Cool. We can turn all of these guys on now to send to the Bracasti reverb because those are all set now. Toms are panned. Let's look at our bass guitar here and see what's what. This might need some limiting too. Yep, I'm gonna put a limiter on this guy here. We'll create a layer, same thing, in case I never ever need to get back to the original guy here. Turn off layers, follow events. I just want to grab these big peaks here and rein them in a little bit. What if I go all the way down? Where are we sitting at? Cool. All right, I'm just doing the same thing, almost pretty much 2.5 dB limiting here on those bigger peaks there. Going to rein our bass in. Cool. Gives us something a little bit more even to start with. I am going to see if there's anything here. Looks like just noise at the beginning. And a little bit of bleed. Any silence that we don't need, I'm going to get rid of because the bass seems to be humming. Even though it's a live recording and we'll have some room ambience running, I don't want to hear any noise if I don't have to. Where's our final note? Cool. Awesome. We will bounce that guy, copy him down, and we can turn on my EQs here. So all this is doing is, if you've seen in my videos before, which if you're watching the live stream, I'm assuming maybe you've seen some of my videos, I'm splitting the frequency spectrum. So the DI, or what I'm calling the DI, because it's all we have is the DI, is just the low end, and then what I'm calling the amp is just the top end here. So we have an okay sounding bass all the way around. And I don't need the layer on this guy. And what I might actually add is, just for fun at the moment, is a distortion track to the bass. Let's see. Yeah, let's mix this in and see what we get. It's subtle at the moment. I can always nuke it if I don't need it. Bass is sounding good. Let's sort through this giant assortment of guitars, which are still running some plugins as well. we've got this extra acoustic up here. Let's see what that... Well, that sounds pretty awful, so I'm not going to use that. That's obviously DI'd. Don't need our count in on that guy. I think I'm going to leave the bleed on the lead guitar, though. All right. Lead guitar sounds good. Nothing on that. These two here sound like they were a pair at one point. But that's supposedly a 12-string. And I think I'm just going to tuck that in the middle. We'll do the same fade on the 12th string. Not the best played either. That's okay. They definitely sound good together, though. So this is what we're going to do here. We're going to use these two guys as a pair, and then we're going to tuck the 12 string up the middle as a support group. And then we've got our lead guitar opposite everything. Now, this top one needs to be bounced. Do I have a layer already? These are different takes. Take one, take two. And then I want to create another layer of just the edit here before I bounce it. So this is still running the virtual microphone, I believe, that was on it. So let's make sure this is bounced, and hopefully this doesn't try and kill the system running the recording system, or the video recording at the same time. Looks okay. Bounce that. All right. Let me do a quick balance here of these two. Cool. So we've got a good balance between the three of those. I'm going to create a bus for all of them. And we'll call it rhythm GTR level. That way we have one control over all three of these guitars. So we'll pull that down. And then we've got our lead guitar, which is all right. I want to hear just these three together, maybe through this verse, and see how everything is sounding. Those are sounding pretty good, especially in mono and stereo. They sound great. Just because I want to hear the lead guitar, I'm going to play through the ending here and maybe balance the lead in. So that's going to be a tricky lead. You can hear it's an acoustic lead and it sounds DI'd. I mean, there's bleed from the room, so maybe not, but maybe it's a mic damp. But it's pretty pokey sounding in places, so that's going to be a little bit of a challenge. Now the lead vocals. Let's hear these guys here.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Now there's a couple different guys here.
Well, I tried to make it Sunday, but I got so damn depressed that I and a woman shook. Well, I keep on thinking about you, Sister Golden Hair Surprise, and I just can't live without you. Can't you see it in my eyes? I've been one poor chorus.
So that's the challenge there with this vocal. You can hear there's reverb printed onto it, which is not ideal.
I ain't ready for the altar. I'm thinking about you. You care. Bop shoo up, chum, bop shoo up, chum, bop shoo up, chum, bop shoo up, chum, bop. Tried to bop shoo up, bop shoo up. Boom, bop, shoo up, boom, bop, shoo up, chum, bop, shoo up, chum, bop, shoo up, chum, bop, shoo up, chum.
He's like fading out for some reason.
Shoo up, chum, bop, shoo up, chum, bop, shoo up, chum, bop, shoo up.
That's strange.
Chum, bop, shoo up, chum, bop, shoo up, chum, bop, shoo up, chum, bop, shoo up, chum, bop, shoo up. Shoo up, chum, bop, shoo up, chum, bop, shoo up. Bop, shoo up. Chum, bop, shoo up.
So we don't need, you can hear how loud the bleed is too, which is not, again, not ideal.
Bop, shoo up. Bop, shoo up. You, sister, go.
That's just the lead vocal. Hear how loud everything is?
1, 2.
Oof. Oof, 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 oof.
Well, I tried to make it Sunday, but
That's why we had this redo. But the redo is from many, many years later.
I got so. Will you meet me in a little boom bop shoo wop, boom bop shoo wop, boom bop shoo wop, boom bop. That I set my sights on Monday and I got myself undressed. I ain't ready for the altar, but I do agree there's times when a woman sure could be a friend of mine.
We might have to go with the redo. Even though he's older and you can hear he sounds older, it's much cleaner and a little bit of tuning. That shouldn't be too much of an issue. I'm going to leave the vocals for the moment because those will need some tuning, I think. Yeah. Again, they're redone here much, much, much later. Everything else is you can hear is from back in the day. Obviously, the drums sound much older. Let me get rid of the bleed at the beginning of the drums here that we don't need. And then we'll get to work mixing this track. I'm going to leave the count in because the count is nice. All right. So we have a good starting point here to actually jump into mixing some of this, especially at least the drums and the bass and the instruments. The vocals are going to be their own battle when we get there. But everything else should be okay. So the first thing I'm gonna get in place here is my mix bus processing before we jump into the drums. So let's see here. I want, and I'll turn on my effects too. I don't think we'll need the room reverb unless I put it on the lead guitar. We'll see. I'll turn all of them on regardless at this point. Those are okay. Turn on the console shaper. All the console shaper is doing is it's literally just the drive turned on. Drive's at 0. No noise, no crosstalk. And then, oh Lord, I hope the tape machine doesn't fart out. Some of these bigger plugins don't get along with OBS sometimes. So this is just my mix bus compressor and my tape. Oh, it didn't fart out. So tape machine and my mix bus compressor. Take a second to load up. Soft tube tape machine. This is pretty much run at default too. I've just bumped the amount up to 5.1. It's on the B setting because I feel like that adds more low end. And then we're at 30 inches per second. The mix bus compressor is the SSL comp or the Brit comp from PreSonus. 2-to-1. Threshold is at -1.6. That's where I always leave it. I push into this. I mix into this. 30 millisecond attack, 100 millisecond release. So slowest attack. Oh, fastest release for this unit. And then I'm adding a dB of makeup gain because I'll probably be doing anywhere from 1 to maybe 2 dB reduction on the track as a whole. And then on the mix bus here, I'm running a limiter that's pushing everything up by about 6 dB. So it's a little bit closer to mastering ideal for me. I want to hear the work from the limiter. That way, when I do send a track to mastering, there's no surprises when everything jumps up in volume. It looks like I can loop this middle section right here to start work on the drums. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to loop this little section right here and just get the drums going. So kick drum first, and then snare drum, and we'll kind of add these piece by piece here. You can see I've pulled my master down about 6 dB. That's to compensate for the volume gain we're getting from the limiter. We're going to start with a limiter just to rein the kick drum in a little bit. The most I want to shoot for is 3 dB reduction. So I'm watching for some of the bigger hits because that's where I want to set it. That looks like our biggest hit right there, so we'll notch this down a little bit more. Cool, got our 3 dB reduction. Make sure nothing else is too crazy at the end. Cool, all right. I just want it sitting around the -12 mark here. That's all. All right, high pass filter first here. That feels good right there. To me, it tightens up some of the low end. I'm rolling off some of the sub, but that's okay. You can hear it tightens up the drum overall. That's all I'm going to do there to start. I'm not going to boost any bottom end at the moment. I want to get my compressor in place here first. We're going to need something a little bit faster on the release, but the attack should be okay right here around 30. I'm going to shoot for around 8 dB reduction. You can hear what we're doing here is we're tightening the sound of the kick drum, but we're emphasizing the attack. That's the reason I leave the attack here on the compressor at around 30 milliseconds, because it leaves enough room for the initial transient to pop through that we then emphasize that initial transient. And our release, we can dial it up just so it's moving in time with the kick drum, and it helps us tighten the source. Now I want to boost top end. There's not a lot of top end to get here. You can hear we're getting a lot of cymbal noise too. That might be okay at the moment. Nope, that's not what I meant to do. I'm actually going to shift these both around. So we'll go, I'm going to make this the high peak here. And I'm going to move this over and make this a shelf. Because now I have the top end click that I want. Nice. That's feeling good. Let's get some bottom end in here. That's feeling pretty good. So I'm gonna have to drag this limiter down too. I might bounce this first limiter just to be safe. Not envelopes. I want to expand layers, and I'm gonna duplicate this kick drum without the limiter in case I ever want to jump back to it. Call it no limit. And then for the moment, I'm going to bounce this first limiter and get it out of the chain because that's not going anywhere. And I can always adjust the limiter later in the chain if I need to. But this first one I can bounce and get it out of there. That's not going anywhere. And maybe put this down to -10 and catch those bigger peaks. So I'm going to pull this back to -9 for the moment. Nice. Cool. Kick drum sounded good. Let's get the snare drum sounding okay. Shouldn't need any limiting at this point. So we should be able to jump right into the EQ. We did our limiting beforehand. So this snare sample is going to need some beef to have some life to it. I think that's all I need. Pre-compression, and then I'll boost top end into the compressor here. A little faster. Perfect. See how it's moving in time with our snare drum now? Excellent. All right, let's get some top end here. I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to go to 9K. Add some air. Nice. You can see there's this big discrepancy here in the mid-range. Nice. Maybe some 3K. Cool. And some low end afterwards. Right there. 138. Sounds like some phase issues. Let me see with the overheads. Seems like we get more bottom end with it flipped. I'm going to leave it flipped. Let's see how the fills sound at the end. Nice. All right, now these two toms. Let's see what's going on here. That sounds okay. That's probably going to be our best bet to mix the toms. Do I need any control? No, the toms look pretty even, so I'm not going to do any limiting or anything like that. Probably just some EQ here to balance them out. None of this 500 hertz. And then maybe 110. Sounds better. Maybe a little bit of gain on them. I don't know if I want to boost top end. They're kind of pokey. I think flipping the phase sounds better. Yeah, let's get this floor tom in. That's our biggest hit there. That doesn't sound so great. Oof. All this nasty mid-range can go. That could use some gain as well. That sounds pretty good. Let's get our overheads going. As uneven as they are. The biggest difference maker, I think, for this whole drum kit is going to be when we add some room sound. These are going to need some de-essing, I think. They're pretty harsh. Okay, not bad. Cool, we're gonna look at this ending section here and add in. Some room. Nice. That's sounding good. That sounded really good.
Do you love me? Will you meet me in the middle? Meet me in the new show you care. Well, I tried to.
We're gonna make this our loop for. This is a chorus section, so we'll make this our loop.
Meet me in the middle. Will you meet?
Don't need our vocal yet, though. This is where I'll be able to dial up that distortion a little bit further. The more instruments we add in, the more we're going to need that distortion to be able to hear our bass inside the track and to be able to discern, the top end of those notes. So let me at least get the plugins I'm going to use here on the bass. We'll go EQ, compression, and EQ. We might have to layer on some of the compression for those bigger notes, but that's okay. I'm going to switch to this ending section here for the bass at the moment. You can see we're lacking some top end here on our bass guitar, it looks like. I'm going to pull out some of this 200 stuff. And then we'll get our compressor going. That's okay, some distortion is alright. Bass can usually take a lot of compression, and don't worry about it distorting, because the low, or not, excuse me, not the low end, the distortion is going to help you hear it in the mix. Add some bite here in the mid-range, or some growl. Now some top end. See if we can maybe dial out some of this distortion. Nice. Now we'll boost up some of this top end. 4K. And then some bottom end. Little low pass, take care of some of that noise. Nice. So here's where I'm tempted to do a little bit of extra work. Not quite sure what I want to do with the guitars yet. If I want to touch them all individually first, and then maybe jump into the bus, just to give them all a little bit more security, I guess. But we'll see here. Let's take a listen. So I think I'm going to end up attacking all these guitars individually. I'm going to pause here for the moment with this track. Ears are getting a little bit tired. We've been going for almost an hour, hour 20, quarter after an hour here. We got the drums in, we got the bass in. What I will do is we'll take a listen through the end here, maybe throw in the lead guitar, and we'll go back to stereo here, bump up to volume, back to 0, and take a listen through the ending, and then we'll end the stream here, take a little break. But let's take a listen to this ending, throw the lead guitar in too.